Good afternoon and welcome to OpenView's webinar series. My name is Casey Renner and I'm the Community Manager here at OpenView. OpenView is a venture capital firm based in Boston that focuses on expansion stage software companies and helping them acquire, retain, and grow the right customers and talent. Today's event will be a live discussion around building a great product and engineering org. Joining us, we have Yoav Shapira, former CPO at Jana, serial entrepreneur and adventure racer. Craig Daniel, currently the VP of Product for JoinMe and who led both product and engineering for JoinMe during a period of rapid scale from 2013 to 2015. And Blake Bartlett, who is a partner at OpenView, who works closely with his companies on product and growth strategy and whose investments include companies like Expensify, Pantheon, Optimizely, Wayfair, and Glassdoor. A few housekeeping items before I turn it over. There will be time for Q&A at the end. As questions come up, please use the chat feature on the left side of your screen, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible for you. And then this event is being recorded, and that will be sent out by me tomorrow. So that all being said, I'm going to turn it over to Blake to take it over.
All right, thank you, Casey, and thank you everybody for joining today. Just to quickly walk through, you probably saw in the invite in the email materials that went out, but just to kind of talk a little bit more about the call and the discussion today and a little bit about the purpose and what we're trying to accomplish. We're going to be focusing on learning how to build an amazing product and engineering organization. We're going to touch on topics like recruiting, managing, retaining, how to maximize productivity of your team, building a strong culture, you name it. And we're going to learn from two experts, as Casey mentioned, Yoav and Craig. So just quickly for them to chime in on their background so you have a little bit of a better sense of them. Craig.
I started in product, well, first in engineering back in the late 90s and have since evolved more to the product side. I currently run product for JoinMe at logging in, and for a couple of years, as Casey mentioned, I grew the engineering team from literally a couple teams to 19 different teams. So through our scaling years there and continuing, and in addition, I ran a couple startups that grew back in the 2000s up into the hundreds of engineers. So topic I'm passionate about.
Hey everyone, I'm Yoav. I work at Car Group, helped start that up right after grad school. My background too is in engineering and product. That was my first startup. Then I worked at HubSpot and helped grow that. Left shortly before the IPO. And then most recently I've been at Jana, which is another software company here in the Boston area that's also growing really fast. Where we're trying to make the internet free for folks in emerging markets through a variety of mobile apps. So like Craig, a topic that's been near and dear to my heart, having built 3 different sets of teams, 3 different organizations.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining, and we'll just jump right into a variety of questions here. So first off, on building a team, can't build a team if you haven't hired anybody onto your team and you haven't recruited anybody. So let's start at the hottest topic perhaps right away, recruiting engineers. So Yoav, you and I have talked about this before, kind of what works and what doesn't work and what you've found in recruiting engineers. So walk us through a little bit of your experience and what works and what's scaling for you.
Yeah, the number one thing that doesn't work is any kind of quick shortcut that I found. People try to do a variety of, maybe if I just had the perfect recruiter or something, then they would send me an infinite amount of candidates that fit my positions and I could just cherry pick. That hasn't been my experience, sadly. What tends to work, like most other things, is kind of knowing your audience. Who do you want to recruit? Where do they hang out? What do they care about? And how do you get kind of that share of mind? So very specifically, I love meetups that are about a particular technology, right? So I don't go to a lot of the huge conference like PyCon, for example. It's an excellent conference for the Python language, thousands of people, etc. For recruiting, it's okay. But if you have a particular framework that you're using in your stack or in your product anyhow, odds are it has a meetup. If not, you can organize it. You're probably only going to get 10, 20, 30 people, but each person who attends that is going to be a viable candidate. That's been a great channel. Happy to elaborate on it. I don't know if you guys know.
Yeah, well, just on that, since you're talking about the targeted meetups, can you give us an example? I think you talked about the Boston Cassandra meetup and
Totally.
as an example.
Jana, we use Cassandra as our sort of main durable storage backend in the SQL database. And the Boston Cassandra meetup is one that we like and we've presented with. I'll give you another example. We use Angular, which is a sort of open source web framework, web development framework for some of our web tools. There's an excellent Angular meetup in Boston and in most of the big cities. And they fit these characteristics. You know, they have a small number of attendees, but it's like nearly perfect signal to noise ratio. Pretty much a lot of hoodies, not a lot of suits. People you want to chat with. There's usually one or two presenters. They're always dying to present, by the way. So presenting at meetups, the meetups are always dying to have presenters. Presenting at meetups is awesome. It's usually like 10 minutes. It's casual. You do like a little PowerPoint about cool stuff your company is doing. It's like the perfect recruiting pitch. You don't have to pay for it. It's free. It's actually slightly better than free. You usually get free dinner out of it. So that's what
ROI positive in many ways.
Yeah, and you also give them back to the community, which is nice. Engineers tend to appreciate it. So that works really, really well. My other, one and 1A or whatever, the other thing that works really well, I think everyone knows this, is referrals from your network. Right? So regularly canvassing your staff, your engineers, but also, product people, designers, sales, marketing. Who's the best engineer you've ever worked with? Why aren't they here yet? Like, how can I best contact them? That's a Paul English, kayak guy. Paul English tip works really well for me. So every quarter, it's part of like our quarterly review process. Actually, like, did you refer anyone this quarter? Do you have anyone in mind now while we're filling out these quarterly reviews? That kind of thing, and that obviously scales nicely as your team grows.
Yeah. And so just lastly to close it on the meetups piece, so you talked about find the right meetup that specifically, or meetups that specifically correlate to the stack that you use.
Yep. Or that you're recruiting for.
That you're recruiting for.
Yeah.
And then present.
If you can, yeah.
And sort of talk about, here's what we're doing, here's all the cool stuff you'd be able to work on, and here's what,
Totally.
The interesting stuff we're doing with a particular technology.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like, again, it's a small meetup, right? So it's not like some peer-reviewed huge conference. We have to put together a presentation, lots of effort, maybe actually get it reviewed and approved. It's not that. We can usually whip together a few slides for a 10-minute presentation, like a couple days before, and that's more than enough.
Yeah.
The goal is to get the audience excited about what you did.
Gotcha. And any things not to do if you find the perfect meetup, what not to do to sort of screw up?
I'm a big fan of being authentic. So if it's an engineering meetup, send engineers, not like recruiters or HR folks. Nothing wrong with them, it's just not the right venue. If you're trying to recruit designers, ideally send designers. If you don't have a designer yet, you're hiring your first one. You can improvise, that's fine. But send the same kind of function that you're trying to recruit. It's going to be better networking, better connection to everyone involved. That's the number one thing. And number two is don't claim to be something you're not. Right? Like, you're not going to have the brand of a Facebook or Google and Amazon, that kind of thing. That's fine. You're not going to outpay them either. But here's what we do. Here's why we care about it. This is why this is cool. By the way, unlike those other companies where there's 50,000 engineers, here you're not going to be a small cog in a big machine. You're going to matter, and here's how. Here's the opportunity. That sort of stuff works really well.
Yeah. Craig, any on recruiting engineers, anything secrets you have, things that you've found that work and don't work currently?
Yeah, I would agree with Joel. The authenticity first, meaning as Joel said, they're dying for content, but they're also dying for space. And some startups might be, we have this tiny little space, it's crappy, we don't want to have a whole bunch of people in here. Well, that's exactly what people want to see. They want to see what is the real working conditions. So take your desk, put them against the wall, improvise on a stage, do something casual for 30 people, and I think that works really well. And when I was back in startups prior to logging in, we did that a number of times, and it worked really well. People were attracted to it. They're like, this is actually where you work. And, even sometimes got to go over to one of the developers' desks and open up his laptop and actually show him some of the stuff we're working on. So it worked really well. Don't feel like you have to put on a big show. Logging in hosts, they make a big deal out of these things, but as a small company, you can't do it.
Yeah. And what about for you, Craig, with recruiters, specifically with engineers? Have you found a way to make that work?
The only time recruiters have worked well, I think, is when they're internal recruiters and they're part of the culture, and they kind of live and breathe the type of people we're looking for. you're keeping them busy on big ideas over for other people. So get those first couple in the door. You know, obviously, hopefully your co-founder, CTO knows these people. But once that flywheel starts spinning, you know, I don't think you need the recruiters. And paying 20% or 25% of their salary, you really can't afford it. You shouldn't need to, quite frankly.
Yeah, gotcha. So last question here on recruiting engineers for the time being. Something like hackathons, right? Go back a few years ago, that was the cool thing to do. Everybody host a public hackathon, invite the community, build something, use it as a recruiting event. Is that still a thing, or is it kind of past its prime?
I haven't seen hackathons work that well as recruiting events. I think they work well for other purposes, which can be fun, right? Someone on your team or people on your team want to play with new technology. Great, this is a structured, contained way to do it. Maybe you have some ideas that are not going to get prioritized by the product team for whatever reason, but you still want to try them. Oftentimes you get sort of internal tooling or internal app sort of ideas like that. Hackathons can be great for that. I haven't seen them work super well for recruiting yet. So I haven't actually done hackathons for recruiting purposes in years.
Yeah, I would say the same. Hackathons, at our company, we have a fair amount of engineers, so we get internal hackathons, and they're great for culture. And they also do help in recruiting, because we can show, like, yeah, these are the business processes. Check out these cool hacks that the teams worked on, and get them excited about it.
But that's more of a second order effect.
More of a second order. You know, it's really tough to you need to put a whole lot of energy to get a whole bunch of developers to come in the room and work on hackathon, and I don't think it's going to be all that effective. Better than that is probably sending some of your engineers to another hackathon if there is one, and have them talk to the people that are doing it.
Yeah, have them evangelize.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Occasionally you see exceptions, but it's usually really cool tech that's not for a specific company, right? So like, for example, the Boston augmented reality meetup, it's an awesome one for recruiting if you're in that space, got Microsoft to donate a few HoloLens kits like a few weeks ago, and I didn't hack on it myself. I wasn't in town that day, but it was like massively oversubscribed. That hackathon. Microsoft sent like security guards. It was like early prototype.
Yeah.
Like the super cool tech thing. Like that's awesome. But I don't know how much it's going to help you with recruiting necessarily.
Yeah.
One last note on this. There's an interesting pattern that you're starting to see. Facebook does this. I was just hanging out at a couple of other Silicon Valley companies where they do a hack month, which is not actually to go hack on whatever you want. It's just to work as part of a different team, an existing team, right? So, hey, there's this other project you've been curious about it. Go work on it for a month. And the idea being that they found you didn't get really much useful work done in a day or two, and you ran into other constraints. In a month, you can really make a significant impact, and maybe you like that team better and you stay there, and maybe you go back to your original team with a lot of new knowledge gained. But that's a new trend that's kind of been seen recently. I haven't done it myself, but it sounds really interesting. So like the next time I do it, I'm going to think about it more like a week or 2 weeks or a month to even get cross-pollination going.
That's really cool. And you actually, I'm just remembering something you've mentioned to me in the past, which is, again, on recruiting engineers, using, and again, on recruiters and sort of doing it yourself versus relying on maybe an external recruiter or something like that who might just be playing buzzword bingo with the latest and greatest, buzzwords and frameworks and whatnot. For you, you said if you're an engineer, if you're an engineering leader, you should be recruiting engineers. And a great way to do that is, and you basically have the street credit that engineers want to see anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're sharing your code, you're talking about your contributions to open source and things like that. Can you just say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think Craig actually nailed it before when he was talking about authenticity. There are recruiters who are good at their job, right? I don't want to like disparage the whole industry. There's some who are very, very good at their job. It's just like you said, it's hard to afford them necessarily, and there's a lot of inefficiency baked into the process until they've been with you for a long time. So yeah, if you're trying to it's know your audience. If you're trying to recruit an engineer, think about what would be appealing for them, and like cool hacks that you've done or projects that you contribute to. Ideally, if they've used them, right? Like I don't know if you've actually contributed to like the Apache server. Odds are this person has used them if they've been coding for a few years. Things like that, they tend to impress and they help you with recruiting. You've got to be honest about kind of the your contribution and stuff. Like you didn't write the whole thing yourself, right? You're part of the community. The authenticity helps. but that really works well in attracting people. And buzzword bingo can have like the opposite effect, right? Once in a while, I'm sure you see these too. Like I just saw a job spec that asked for someone with 5 years of Swift experience. Swift, the iOS language, hasn't existed for 5 years, right? So no one has that.
Yeah.
So whoever wrote that is stupid, right? Like they're shooting themselves in the foot, and you have to be very cognizant of that.
Yep.
You lose credibility really fast.
Exactly. So shifting gears still within the recruiting conversation, Craig, talking about recruiting PMs. So what have you found makes a good PM from a DNA standpoint, and how do you identify those people?
Yeah, recruiting PMs is hard. We've had better luck starting with either internal people, like maybe developers who want to come over, Scrum Masters, or who want to come over and work on as a product owner or a PM at first. And we've had good luck at getting relatively junior people in, like a couple years in, we can cut them also. But from a DNA, what it all comes down to is I've always felt like super smart, which sounds obvious, but ability to consume a ton of information, lots of different inputs, and learn and basically distill that down and use their judgment on like what the most important thing is or what we should do next. And that is a unique skill that it's hard to assess in an interview, quite frankly. I think you have to look through their history and go through some scenarios. That's why I find it a little bit easier to do internally to get really great people. But the PM role is a unique one in that each organization is different. So you got to make sure that the role that you need is exactly what they're doing. So I would say to roll it back to south, PMs have like 100 stakeholders, right? They have customers, they have the boss, they have the CEO, their opinion. They have to be able to deal with all of that and distill it down to the next thing, the most important thing. So the engineers know exactly what we're doing next, why. And recruiting them, for that reason is tough, honestly. It really is.
Yeah. So on that point, a little bit of the growing and training and nurturing from within.
Yeah.
Some folks like David Cancel over at Drift, he has recently written a lot about this, that he actually doesn't recruit PMs, right? If you have existing experience, chances are you might have learned things the wrong way from the way that they're trying to do things at Drift, right? And so some people have, developed, I'm going to look for the raw DNA and actually avoid people who have been PMs in the past, and that's going to be my key to success. Would you go as far as that, or what have you found there?
Well, I think David's point that he was making is that PMs is such a wide spectrum of roles, and he talks a lot about getting an MBA, and you got to get your MBA to become a product manager. I don't have an MBA, which means that actually on my team I have a couple of guys on the team who are MBAs, and they're incredibly helpful for modeling and forecasting, so that when we say, maybe at a startup you don't need to do this as much, but in a public company like LogMeIn, I need to be able to say, look, the reason we're doing this thing next instead of this other item is because it's forecasted to bring in $1 million next year based on all these mechanics. And I don't need an MBA to do that. It certainly helps, right? It certainly helps when you go to the board and to the executive team. That being said, I tend to value creative maker types who can make decisions and just kind of just iterate and move the ball down the field. I mean, there's no silver bullets. It's like marketing. It's like anything. There's no silver bullets in product management typically. You don't. It's a grind. So it's all about just diligence and organization and focus and prioritization and just continuing to grind and knock things out. So I wouldn't go so far to say what David said, that I wouldn't recruit them, because we've had some success. But it is much easier to do some of the intensive side of that DNA, that shit-based DNA.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you obviously you're just Chief Product Officer at Jhana, so a lot of experience recruiting folks in product. And I think what we're seeing right now is, at least what I'm observing, is that people coming straight out of college, they don't want to go work at Goldman Sachs. They don't want to work at McKinsey. The new cool job is being a PM at a startup, right? Or working in product at a startup, at a tech company. Or getting into Google's APM program or something like that. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
All these things are cyclical. So I haven't hired a PM out of school, ever. Not because of some philosophical necessarily opposition to it. It's just the bar is so high, I think, to be a good PM. All the skills that Craig mentioned, many of them actually take years to develop. Some maybe you're just like born organized or something. But like communication skills are a huge part of it. You need to be able to explain to engineers what to do next, like Craig said, but also to salespeople what we're doing next. It might be a different language and kind of how that impacts their sales, right? And to other stakeholders. That takes a lot of time. Like I haven't kind of seen people out of school who can do it. I have, like Craig, hired people with past PM experience, exactly like you said, when it's highly complementary in other directions. So I'll give you an example. At Jana, we are very concerned with fraud. Right? We process a lot of payments, so there's all sorts of fraud that can happen, has happened. And so I specifically sought out someone very analytical with experience, and I ended up hiring a guy who was a PM at PayPal for a few years working on that stuff. And his industry knowledge is so big, he's got the other skills, but it's been hugely beneficial to the rest of the company. So that's worked really well. Yeah. You know, I feel like when I was in business school, there was kind of a joke, because I have an engineering background, that by the time a company, like if a company was desirable as a place to work for engineers, that's a good thing. That's a future forward positive predictor. Whereas if a lot of MBAs wanted to work there, it had missed its peak, right? And you should watch out, like avoid that.
Good advice from VC too.
I don't know like where the millennials wanting to be PMs are, but I know this, like if I even get a whiff of someone who thinks they're Steve Jobs and kind of has that ego, where they want to be a PM because they mistakenly think PMs make all the decisions and like manage everyone, that like we stop the interview process there. Because a PM has to influence often without HR authority, right? And in the organizations that I've seen, like it's a parallel function to engineering, right? Like a PM usually doesn't manage engineers, they help decide what to do, but they don't actually manage them and do their reviews and things like that. Same with marketing or sales. That's a really hard position for a young person to negotiate. Not that it's impossible, but it's hard. Like Craig, I much prefer that they have functional expertise in something. Right? I've had great PMs from sales, from marketing, from engineering, from QA, customer support, awesome PMs. They have a lot of empathy for the user. Even do like a year or two there, learn the business, learn the culture, makes you 10 times more likely to be a PM.
Yeah. Classic nature versus nurture. Not a lot of people will come out of the womb knowing how to do all of that complex prioritization, managing different stakeholders, you know, all that kind of stuff. You might have the DNA, Craig, as you were saying, for creativity and curiosity, which is good. That makes the potential for the makings of a good PM, but you know, there's a lot of maturity stuff that you need to, you know, learn.
Right? It's not. It seems like a glamorous job because you know, the blogs might write about a hot new product or something, but it's not very glamorous. I mean, especially if you want to go PM, be a junior PM at Slack right now, you'd be working on like really boring things, and so it's not that glamorous. You'd probably be working on like we need you to work on the next 10 emojis that we're going to put in our emoji library or something. And it's just not real sexy, or maybe that would be interesting to some people, but it would be very minute, they'll grind it out things while they get their feet wet and kind of eventually get more scope over a larger team. So we've had some success out of business school after they've been in the world for a couple years, but not right out of undergrad.
Yeah.
I agree. And to go back to something else that Craig said, the role is really differently defined for different companies. You have to take all this with a grain of salt, think about what you actually need the person to do. But it's pretty universal that you want to be, if you're in a tech company, you don't want to be doing a really great job actually building the product, a really great job selling it. I generally advise younger people to go deep on one of those axes before going broad. It just helps you so much. You have so much more value. The younger you are, the less you know what your career trajectory is going to be. So don't bucket yourself as I'm going to be a PM. It's it can be very hard to move from PM to engineering, for example, but the other way is relatively easy. So good to keep in mind.
Yeah. So another thing, if we combine some of these topics we've been talking about, bringing young people into the organization, sort of a lot of expectations as to what they're going to be working on versus the reality, but there's a lot of ambition, a lot of curiosity, a lot of creativity. You know, we're hosting things like hack months or hackathons or whatnot, so that could bring up something like the shiny object syndrome, right? I want to work on the Slack integration for our company or whatever. That might not be a priority. So how do you deal with that shiny object syndrome, especially if you're talking about having younger PMs or younger engineers on the team, without also, on the other hand, you don't want to kill creativity and ambition as well. So how do you kind of mark that fine line?
So I try to be very transparent about what our goals are and so when we're looking at our roadmaps and looking at our day-to-day judgment and even up to the engineer level, how they're deciding where they invest in rewriting a package, rewriting some code or hacking it, you know. If they understand what the ultimate goal is, you know, what we're really, and that changes, that could change a couple times a year depending on what you're doing, that helps focus and let them answer their own questions. But then this is where we've had these hackathons, week-long hackathons at LogMeIn that have been helpful to let some of the important but not critical items to be done and creative things. We also, some of the teams do FedEx days, they're called FedEx, you ship it in one day, and that's been helpful. So I think you just have to create the outlet, and then also get creative. I got advice from a VP early on in my career, which is that, you know, product management or even engineering management is a little bit like politics, which is you have to be creative at attaching your agenda to the thing that's rolling out the door. So like if there's a hot agenda item, like figure out how to fit yours on that train and complement it and ride it. So some of that is just getting creative and teaching them how to, hey, we're touching this part of the system. Maybe that Slack integration is maybe a good thing right now because it complements it pretty well and it's all bundled together and you kill two birds with one stone.
So that makes sense. The other, like, I think it's the same thing in different words, to treat them like adults. It doesn't matter if they're millennials or however young or old they are, but here's why. These are our priorities. Here's how we set them. Here's how that translates to your work. It tends to work really well, as long as it's transparent and they understand it. If they don't think you have the right priorities, that's a different conversation, but also a good one to have. I found that, like, I don't even know hopefully I haven't tried too hard, but you can't kill creativity or ambition. Like, if you do, you probably hire the wrong people to start with. But, so you don't actually need to worry about it too much. What you need to worry about is they think you're working on the wrong stuff and they won't speak up about it. So they don't feel like it's a welcoming culture or their manager doesn't understand it. That's really bad, because then people bottle things up and they start doing their side projects with other companies and stuff. So treat them like adults, have good one-on-ones and other communication channels. Like, here's why we're doing what we're doing. How do you feel about working on this? Like, would you rather try something else? Why do you want to try that other thing? Those are constructive conversations, and you can facilitate them, including with hackathons and stuff, but you can also facilitate, you know, regular team rotations after a year or whatever. That all tend to work well.
Yep, makes sense. So shifting a little bit to talk about, you know, organizational design and things like that. Craig, we've talked about this before. You've mentioned sort of the art of organizational design, right? And so I know that a lot of people have their preferred way of organizing their engineering team, you know, or their whole organization with squads and guilds and teams and whatnot. So what's your point of view? What works? Is there an optimal state? Is there something that's perfect?
There's no perfect answer to this one. When it comes to org design, this is an area that if you are in a engineering or probably product or potential, you know, if you're a founder, I think you just have to read like everything that comes out. Just immerse yourself in like the difference between lean and agile and scrum and kanban and all the different practices, because I have yet to see an organization that just kind of takes the book and like implements it. You cherry pick a few things from here and there that work. And I think the important thing, like, you know, I often, believe it or not, I often go back to the people and interactions over process. You know, I don't remember them all, but it's basically getting work done over following a plan, you know, following change over a plan. But it's, as long as it embodies that spirit. I think I've looked at the like the Spotify stuff, the guilds and squads. I thought it was really inspiring. It doesn't quite fit to exactly what we're doing at Log Me In, but I stole a little bit of the essence of that and immersed and brought it in. But at the end of the day, it's what are you optimizing for, and what is the team optimizing for? So to boil it down, if I just think about it like this: if you know what you need to build and you just need to break it up into small pieces, then I find Scrum to be a decent tool for that, because it allows you to iterate and show your work as you go. If you are in kind of a break fix or an ad hoc type thing, workflow, I like to use Kanban for that, which is, okay, the just-in-time prioritization. When developer capacity frees up, they pull from the top of the queue. Maybe they do a just-in-time design session and move on. And I think the tough area really starts to get in, like, well, we know where we want to go, but we don't quite know what we want to build. It's more of an innovation. And I think that's where you need to kind of mix and match and just, like, I don't have the perfect answer for that. So that's been my experience. You know, Scrum and Kanban work really well in some areas, but then you start having to mix in all the blend in all this stuff when you need to innovate. I don't know if you would add anything.
No, I agree. There's no surprise probably at this point. There's a lot of frameworks out there. People pick and choose for their organization anyhow. Like Scrum actually has this notion of Scrum Bucks, CUTs, which is a collection of organizations and how they do Scrum, but they change something or other. So that's a part of it. To me, by far, the most important thing in like the org design is including the non-technical folks in whatever structure you have, right? So
this gets into cross-functional teams, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that. So just walk us through what you've seen there and your philosophy of it.
Wherever you can include people from marketing, sales, customer support, whatever, include them. Whether it's sprint, planning for Scrum, what do we work on? Whether it's a daily stand-up, which a lot of people do independent of other frameworks. Just having the voice of the business kind of more embedded, having personal relationships between developers and other stakeholders makes so much of a bigger difference to me than whether you're using Scrum or Kanban for a particular week or month. Just because you tend to make more informed choices, you have more data. You also get better relationships, right? So it's so much easier if the engineer can turn to like a salesperson and be like, hey, does this fit kind of what you talked about? Will this demo well? Will it sell well? What do you think? And yeah, that person's not a PM, they're a sales rep. That's fine though. Like it helps build those relationships and educate everyone involved. So however you want to incorporate, like I'm a fan of both systems that you mentioned. HubSpot used Scrum for a long time. Jana is more of a Kanban thing for everybody. In many cases, I let the teams pick their process, subject to some other criteria. So for example, they have to be transparent about what they're working on, has to be accessible to everyone in the org, whether it's an issue tracking dashboard or whatever, as well as the reasoning for what they're working on. These are objectives, therefore we're working on these things, here's how they tie together. If there's a hypothesis or a theory that explains it, that has to be transparent so we can all comment and discuss it and things like that.
Yeah.
But I ask them to manage their day-to-day work however they see fit to actually deliver.
Yeah. How early should people start going cross-functional in terms of teams?
I would do it from the beginning. I don't see why not. I don't think you can do it too early. It usually happens anyhow. That's not usually the problem is the opposite, right? Usually when you start a company, you have a founding team or the first few employees, and there's like one of each function, and a lot of decisions are cross-functional. At that point, things tend to be okay. It's more like in the middle stage, maybe you've hired 10 or 20 engineers, so what starts to happen is you have your first engineering team, there's like a back-end and a front-end team or something, and all the interfaces go through the head of engineering. That's when things start to break down a little. You don't want to lose those connections or something. So I would start it and then keep it as long as you can. Yeah. It doesn't have to be formal, right? Like again, keep going on managing each other. Usually what you find is if you work on interesting features and you make it a daily, just let the sales team know that one or two of them can join daily stand-up, you'll have one or two who really care. They're the ones you want in there anyhow. They're your alpha testers. They're your guinea pigs. The others don't actually care that much. You just want to sell whatever you're building. That's totally fine.
Yeah. At the scale level for joining, so we have, like I said, I think 19 or 20 teams now, and a lot of them are overseas or in California, so it hasn't been very practical to do what Rob was saying. That being said, what we've been pushing really hard, which I think is just as important as the structure, is kind of trying to have feature toggles. So we release features to log me in employees, and just join me as a subset of log me in is what we're using. But we release log me in employees first. We have Slack channels where, and there's several releases per week of our Mac and Windows apps. There's other ways to get our mobile apps. And we have feedback channels. And it's the same cast of characters that you'll see in there, the ones that really care and want to give feedback. But they get in the loop early. And we even, working on feature projects, we did it even earlier than the rest of the people, right? So they can be advocates by the time it comes out. And that's been helpful for us to scale. It's not perfect. Slack is helping in that sense, though. But really, it's the continuous shipping, I think, is the most important agile, whether you're in a startup or not. I think you've got to ship continuously, even if all your customers don't get it on a day. It's got your employees need to see the next thing as quick as possible. If it takes too long, people start getting anxious, change their mind, what happens to whatever, lose faith. So it's got to be transparent, as you all said. I like to do it sometimes with just ship by ship it. Sometimes it's easy to be transparent.
Well, figuring out continuous delivery and gradual rollouts are the really important best practices. Because the problem that you definitely want to avoid is having the engineering team be perceived as some sort of dark cave, black hole by the rest of the organization. You don't really know what they do. They're just kind of hacking over there. Who knows? And who knows when they'll release something and whether that would be valuable or not. That problem is really bad. You want to avoid that. Whatever way you can bring sunshine into it, whether it's gradual rollouts, alpha releases, continuous delivery for sure, matters a lot more than guilds or tribes or the internal org. Still an interesting topic. Lots of ways to fuck that up too. If I can say that, but whatever. But the continuous delivery is the future.
Yep. So that starts to touch a little bit on, Craig, what we've talked about before, which is not sort of avoiding fallacies of perfectionism and things like that. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's a kind of I don't know if it's a controversial topic sometimes at the companies I've been at, but something I've noticed is that most code only lives a year or two maybe, especially if it's in a growing product or a growing business. If it's not a growing business, you're probably going to just put it on ice and it doesn't matter anyway. So what I've learned, and this is, I probably learned it as an engineer earlier in my career, was that it just this isn't saying gag me, you ain't gonna need it, like that. Just do not over-engineer, do not, know when, have a good relationship between the developers and the product manager. It's is it okay to kind of hack this one, but really that is a really big problem in that if engineers aren't clear about what the goals are and they don't have good communication with the product manager, their default position is to overarch. That's just the default. It's just to build this masterpiece. So you have to continually be working not to build a masterpiece because it just doesn't. The code, if it's a good product and a good business, it's not going to last that long anyway.
You're going to rewrite it anyway.
So that would be my and that's very unnatural, especially when you get engineers out of elite CS schools or they're like, I want to build this masterpiece. It's like, no, we just want you to ship it. So it's a little bit controversial even inside our own walls, but I don't know how you feel about it.
No, I agree. The key insight is that you're going to rewrite it anyhow, right? In nature, there's only two states, evolving and dead. So that's another phrasing of what he said was either it's growing and you need to add new features. Even if you don't need to add new features, 6 months later, a year later, there's going to be some interesting tech that makes your product markedly better. You're going to rewrite it. So don't obsess too much. The art is knowing where the balance is. It's not always easy, right? That's where code reviews can help. Not to obsess over some small details necessarily, but to be like, there's this major use case, so we already committed to doing next month. We do need to improve that one. So that's where helpful management code reviews can help a lot. But I agree, the key insight is you're going to rewrite it anyhow. Plan for it, right? There's an anticipated cost. It's not something that you do like nights and weekends or someone's kind of best effort. Rewriting is like not a hackathon project as an engineering product, or you need to plan for it. It's going to impact kind of the new feature release schedule and things like that. But then it's normal. It's totally fine. It's not a reflection on any developers involved, past or present.
One of the things we've obsessed over is if you're going to architect something awesome, make it the testing system that tests your code automatically. And I'm pretty proud of where that is for the joint team, and that most of the stuff that we touch is really, really hard to mess up production to get through the spider web of tests. And we put some discipline in that if we break something in production, we add a test. And again, that's not always perfect, but just to make it so every day you're getting more and more coverage on your code and shipping. I think you're seeing this is the theme here. It doesn't really matter what your processes are on how you organize teams as long as they're effective in good communication. What's most important is that you ship often, you can't break production easily over time. On day one, who cares? There's no users. You can't break production, but over time, make a really tight sheet that every developer feels that they can hit the button without risk.
Yeah. And there's a couple of points that were really good as well. Like you said, some developers are not at ease with this, right? Some engineers want to build a perfect piece of code. Fast-growing startup is probably not the place for them to work. There's plenty of other places that will hire them, all sorts of R&D labs, bigger orgs, etc. It could be equally interesting. That's a hiring thing that we actually do try to screen for. Like, how do you think about shipping? How do you balance it? Designers have this issue where sometimes things must be pixel perfect, and then they don't need to be pixel perfect, right? How do you balance that in?
Yes. In fast-growing startups, sometimes that gets solved by communication, and if you're whatever mechanism you want to do. We used to do like a Friday lunch where we buy lunch for everyone, and we all sit around the table and we talk about the really nasty problems that we have. Like, geez, our sales really sucked this week, and the engineers are like, well, what happened? Like, why did we lose that deal? And more often than not, the engineers would go home on the weekend and be like, oh, I cleaned up our e-com flow and tweaked this one thing. I'm hoping that should help the thing. And I added maybe I added an A/B test or something to see if it will help it based on our Friday lunch, right? And with that $100 you spent on lunch, right? But again, just by getting people to feel the pain that a lot of times it's easy for engineers and product people to forget that they're literally building something that turns like people's intent into dollars. It's a business, right? So whether you're doing ad sales or whether you're doing a utility like JoinMe or a communication platform, at the end of the day, you want retained users who eventually pay you.
Yep.
And
they're happy.
And if they're not doing that, then you have a problem. And everybody needs to make sure that they get that message often.
Yeah.
Because like I said, the default state is building the masterpiece. So you need to remind people that that's not what our goal is.
So shifting just in the last little bit that we have here to some audience questions, we have Zoltan asking, how often do you mix up cross-functional teams?
Great question. You're going to find your own timing as it fits your organization. I try to keep teams together for about a year, if possible, and also when mixing them up, not to like totally scramble the team, but have a net zero, so like add someone new and take someone else out, maybe a 2 at a time. And I'm a big fan of smaller teams, right? So these teams, they have a tech lead, 3 or 4 developers, a PM, a marketer, salesperson, etc. Total 7 or 8 people. Taking 1 or 2 out at a time is okay. I like the teams to be together for a year.
Yeah.
That's not scientific. I've done it some less, some more. You got other circumstances.
And also from the same audience member, what do you do if somebody needs to be on more than one cross-functional team?
You have missed planning.
Okay.
Correct your.
So that should not happen.
Yeah, correct your planning. So first, you probably have a single point of failure. At the very least, like, document why that is. We need to hire differently, replan the project, have them train someone else. There's a lot of outs from that, but that's a classic symptom of planning that can be used.
Okay, great. What are you guys seeing in terms of this increasing popularity around the growth role, if you will? A growth engineer, somebody that's on the growth team, is that part of a cross-functional team, or is that a cross-functional role, multidisciplinary role inherently? What is that all about?
Yeah, so it was one of the first teams that joined me that we started here. So most of our engineers at Lagnian are in Budapest, Hungary, and great engineers, high code quality, really scalable. But because they were 6 time zones away, it was really hard to be close to the business and be close to the kind of the little things that help the growth. So we started a team here. It's interesting. I find growth is often seen as like the silver bullet. There's all sorts of forums online you go on and like, oh, I did this thing on Facebook or Twitter and Snapchat or whatever, and it grew at 72% in signups. That is more of a grind than any other discipline. So you need people who are system thinkers rather than creatives are good, but you need a system thinker leading it, in my opinion. You need somebody who is diligent, and in our case, we hired a former engineer who I had worked with, who's very process oriented and very diligent in testing and analytical, and it's just a grind. I think that businesses that rely on a high volume of new users, or I think you need the role, should be cross-functional. But like I said, very systematic. It's not super sexy role anybody on that team to be like, changing your e-com flow or changing your sign-up flow, or should we have people validate their email in 1 day or 7 days, or both, or like
very in the weeds.
Yeah.
Yet the expectation is that you're going to find the magic button, right? So the expectations are also very high for that person.
Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you have some aha moments, but very often not.
Yeah. Did you guys have growth engineers or growth people?
We actually had a growth team at Jana. So first, to go back to what Craig said, I agree. It depends on the business, right? At HubSpot, it wasn't as much of a concern because we were an inside sales model with a really efficient marketing machine. There's a bunch of content, social media marketing, things like that, generated leads. The salespeople worked the leads.
The top of funnel was big enough that it covered for a lot of.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was also B2B, and eventually you get to the point even in B2B where referrals work really well, right? For Jana, it's a user-facing piece is almost entirely referrals. So mostly we want to focus on making the product good enough that they refer their friends and family, classic kind of consumer thing. We did, however, want to just experiment with other channels for marketing and user acquisition, and so we started a cross-functional growth team. It didn't have a single person who was like the growth person. There was a PM with growth interest. There was a couple of developers, and there was a marketing person. And together they did a whole bunch of experiments, campaigns, analytics. Some of them were like maybe the marketing person can execute 90% of the time, and some of them were much more engineering heavy. Let's try this A/B test of the sign-up flow. I'll give you just one example. We didn't have any like, oh my God, 200% improvement sort of moment. But we had a few 10 and 15% wins, which are material in our business.
Sure.
So
one of the things that Join Me that we work a lot with is when do you confront users to register for the product?
Yeah.
Because Join Me's roots were in kind of instant screen sharing. It was very much seen as a tool. I click a button, I download, and I tell someone to go to Join Me/Craig Daniel or whatever my link is, and they come and they can see what I'm seeing in seconds. Over the years, that pivoted into more of a business, web conferencing and online meetings, and eventually more than that. So it's like, well, when do I confront people that like this is actually a business product that they're going to want a free account of, but then we're going to nurture them to eventually use it, retain and use, and maybe confront them and pay them at some point. That's really hard, right? And because you really need people who are creative, but also diligent in like looking at cohort analytics and really understanding how the testing methodology so they don't mess it up, because sometimes you can get false positives and it can take your business back, get false negatives and take your business back. So I love the team that we have. I think they're great. And we're just integrations and all sorts of fun things have been really positive for us. But
sure,
it's probably, to close this out, is probably the similar thing we were saying. None of this is all that sexy, no silver bullets, it's a grind, just figure out what your process is, communicate it, have goals, and ship often.
great. So a final audience question here for you, Yoav, on sort of engineering teams experimenting with new technologies, and in particular new frameworks. If you're using Angular today, but then everybody's talking about React in the world, is it responsible to test that out, to shift over, or is just pick something and stick with it?
Again, you're going to have different people have different philosophies. I think you're going to have to rewrite it anyhow. The question becomes, when is it responsible to do so, and how do you choose interesting candidates, right? Because React is probably validated enough, a lot of people are using it, but there's always some new framework someone came up with last week, especially in like the JavaScript world, or even sometimes you get databases, like a shiny new database. Is that really ready for you to handle your production load? Is it reliable enough, et cetera? So I tend to do a two-pronged sort of approach. The first one is, like, without scheduling anything formal, if someone wants to play, like if an engineer wants to play with some new framework because they think it's sexy or interesting or whatever, let them play. We don't wait for a hackathon or something. Give them a day or two, but it's on their own time. Like, they still have their work responsibilities, because I want them to really care. It has to be an amazing piece of technology that they really want to play with. And at the same time, all our tech leads and myself and other people watch out for sort of frameworks that clear that bar for, okay, this is really interesting, maybe it's really material, or maybe we need it for other reasons. Like, I'll give you an example. At Jana, about a year ago, our volume of data grew such that, like, our aggregate database got to be a pain in the ass where we did all the analytics. So I grew it, and we could have kind of doubled down on MySQL, but it was a natural time in the course of the business to look at what other sort of BI platforms might be out there, which ones make sense. So we did, like, one of our relevant teams took that on as a project. It was one of their objectives. They did a survey, they did a test implementation, and they converted over. So you can kind of get to it that way.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Well, we want to be mindful of everyone's time. You guys probably have things at the top of the hour, so we'll let you run to that. But Yoav, Craig, thank you so much. Casey, back over to you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Blake, Craig, and Yoav. Much appreciated for your time today. As I mentioned before we started, I will be sending out the recording of their conversation tomorrow. And if you have any outstanding questions for them that maybe didn't get answered, you saw their Twitter handles on the slide deck, but also please feel free to funnel your questions through me. You have my email from our correspondence, and I will make sure to get those answered for you. So hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks again for attending, and we hope to see you at an event again in the future. Bye.
Thank you.